Okay. So we discussed about geographies, data, legal entity creation, along with the legal address. Now, so we have primary ledger ready, legal entity ready. The next task is assign legal entity to primary ledger. Assign legal entity to primary ledger. We'll go and assign our legal entity to primary ledger. So search for task called as assign legal entities. Here is the task. Assign legal entities is the task. Click on this task. Make sure your primary ledger is in the selected scope. You are going to assign legal entity to which primary ledger? That primary ledger should be in the selected scope. How system already selected our primary ledger in the selected scope? We have completed task called as ledger options. When you go to ledger options, we have to select our ledger, then we can navigate to ledger options. The moment you selected your ledger for ledger options, the same ledger is reflecting for other tasks wherever ledger is required. Click on assign legal entity. If you want to change the primary ledger, you know how to do that. Click on the name, and from here you can search and select your desired primary ledger. Now click on assign legal entities. Here is our primary ledger. We are going to assign legal entity, whatever we created in the last session. Click on plus icon. Search for our legal entity. ADP. Find out. Select and click on apply. Click on done. If you have multiple legal entities within one country, yes, all the legal entities you can assign to the same ledger. The same process, click on plus icon, search, select, and add it. So this is how you can assign one or multiple legal entities to your primary ledger. Click on save and close. What is the next task? The next task is assign balancing segment values to legal entities. Okay, the balancing segment values, whatever we have within our primary ledger, those balancing segment values we are going to assign to our legal entity. In our example, we have only one legal entity and three balancing segment values. The three balancing segment values we are going to assign to same legal entity. It means with one registration, we are doing those three businesses. Right. So here is the task. Assign balancing segment values to legal entities. Next to this task, we have another similar task. Assign balancing segment values to ledger. We no need to assign balancing segment values to ledger. If you have any company which is not registered, such kind of companies you have to assign to ledger. Mostly you don't come across. So if you have any company which is not registered company, and if you want to maintain that company on your primary ledger as one of the balancing segment value, those you can assign to ledger. So ideally, you don't need to perform it. Always we assign balancing segment values to legal entity. Click on assign balancing segment values to legal entity. You are going to assign balancing segment values to legal entity where you have your balancing segment values within this primary ledger. Within the primary ledger, we have chart of accounts. Within the chart of accounts, we have balancing segment values. Those balancing segment values, whatever we have inside of this primary ledger, those balancing segment values we are going to assign to our legal entity. Click on this task. Now, here is our legal entity, and we have balancing segment values within this chart of accounts, which is part of our primary ledger. To assign the balancing segment values to legal entity, click on plus icon. So to this legal entity, we are going to assign our balancing segment values. Click on drop down, select 1000, click on save and assign another. We have to assign two more. So use the tab as save and assign another. Select company 2000, click on save and assign another. Select company 3000, no more companies we have to assign. Click on save and close. Now, the three companies, three balance and segment values we assign to this legal entity. It means the three companies we are running under this registration. If you have multiple legal entities, the same process. Okay, if you have multiple legal entities, you'll find out all the legal entities here. Select the desired legal entity and click on plus icon. That's how you can assign the balance and segment values. Click on save and close. What is the next task? So we assign legal entity to primary ledger and balance and segment values to legal entity. Now create location for business unit. When we create business unit, location is required. Even you don't see it as a mandatory, just map location to business unit so that when you record the transactions, that every use case will run smooth. So search for the task called as manage locations. Task name is manage locations. We created location for legal entity, which we call as legal address. The task also totally different. We use the task called as manage legal addresses. That legal address you cannot use for your business unit. The reality, your registration address and your business unit address could be same sometimes, but still you have to create locations separately by using the task called as manage locations. Search for locations. Click on manage locations. Click on plus icon to create. Click on plus icon. The location definition is part of HCM. Okay, it's HCM information. It is treated as a shared service. You can the location definition you can do for any application. Fine. Say ADP dollars is the location name, the business unit location. And scroll little down, provide the main address information. Country is defaulting because of the profile option, which we discussed yesterday. And provide address line 1, ADP USBU location. Just any text you can provide since we are testing. Select zip code. It can fetch state, city, county information. Okay, you can proceed with a random code. It is not mandatory. You have to carefully choose Dallas related postal code. You can pick any one. Just we are practicing anything, any data is okay for us. So done. So this is how we have to provide the name, code, and fill the main address mandatory fields at least. Now click on submit so that address will be created. Please go on mute. Say yes. So this is how we can create location for business unit. Now we'll see how to create the business unit. How to create the business unit, we'll go and see that. Say okay. Fine. The task name is manage business unit. We are going to create the business unit. The task name is manage business unit. You no need to search every time with the prefix manage. Directly you can search with the actual task. Here is the task. Manage business unit. Click on the same task one more time. Here you could see all the business units which are created in this environment. But in fresh instance, you don't see any sample business units. When you navigate to this page, you will find the page as a blank. This is how you see. Let's create business unit, which is very simple definition. Click on plus icon. Provide your business unit name. Reality, how we give the naming convention for the business unit. That data we get from the client. If you are creating each legal entity as a business unit, yes, your legal entity name you provide as a business unit, or else there could be some other naming convention that client will decide. We'll ask them. Okay, we'll ask them. So we explain them what does it mean by business unit and what name they want to have for their business units. That input we should get always from the client. It is not our decision. We don't decide the naming convention, how they want to have a like naming convention for their business units. That data client will provide, the same we have to create in the system. Yeah. Now here we'll take the name for our practice convenience as a ADP US business unit. ADP US business unit. So who is the manager for this business unit? Who is heading this business unit? It may be their branch, or it may be specific business, or it could be their entity. Whatever it may be, as per applicability, you have to select who is the manager. If you want to select manager, first you have to create the employee. Then you can select as a manager for this business unit. Anyway, the field is optional. Leave it. And location field also optional. Location field is optional. If you don't select location, already we discussed this point, certain concepts doesn't work. Which concepts we will see when we start working on the system related to transaction process. So even field is optional. Okay, select location as mandatory. Click on drop down, search. Our location name is ADP. ADP dollars. Select. And we have one more field as default set. We have one more field as a default set. When you see the term set, you should understand that is nothing but a reference data set. That is nothing but a reference data set. So we'll understand the story of reference data set very soon. Now just fill out and proceed. Just make a note. What we are doing, just make a note. At the time of business unit creation, there is one field called as default set. When you see set, it refers reference data set. Okay, reference data set, RDS, reference data set. So select reference data set. First, we don't know what is a reference data set. Okay, just we are going to select one value. Here, search for common. Say okay. So there is one field called as default set. For that, we are providing the value as a common. Why? What is a reference data set? What is a common? We will understand. Okay, we'll understand maybe after 2-3 classes. Once we start working on the payables, there we are going to create our own reference data sets. And we'll understand how this can be useful in the system process, why Oracle is offering these reference data sets. Yep. For now, don't think about this reference data set. Just make a note during the business unit creation. We selected reference data set called as common or common set. The description is common set. That's it. So this is how we have to create the business unit. Any questions here, please? Okay. No questions. If you have, if as per, I mean, like you are implementing for one client, as per their business, we need to create 10 business units. Yes, this is a process. We have other option to create business units through spreadsheet. That we will discuss very soon. But if you want to create business unit through manual process, these are the points we have to understand. Okay, we are creating the business, we are providing the business unit name, and manager name for the business unit is optional. Location even optional, select as a mandatory, and we are providing the reference data set called as common. And here you could notice there is a checkbox as active or not active. If you disable, this business unit won't be available for transactions. Now click on save and close.
One question, when we are assigning business, segment values to legal entity, if we have multiple legal entities and assume that
segment values, okay, don't call as segment value, always call as balancing segment value. We don't assign
balancing
other segment values to legal entity. That is the reason always balancing segment values.
Balancing segment values to legal entities. And if I have multiple legal entities and multiple balancing segment values, and few segment values I assign to one primary ledger, and when I am going to the second primary ledger, will
one second. You mentioned few balancing segment values you assign to primary ledger.
One primary ledger.
What does it mean, assigning balancing segment?
For example, I have 50 balancing segment values, which are nothing but companies, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
And 40, assume that 5 assigned to primary ledger 1. And when I am going to secondary ledger, will those 5 will also be shown in the list, or only the remaining 45?
Secondary ledger. What do you mean by secondary ledger here?
No, second ledger, second primary ledger.
Okay, second, one more you have.
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
And 5 I already assigned to first primary ledger, and I'm going to assign the balancing segment values to second primary ledger. Will the list, complete list will be shown, or only the remaining balancing segment values will be shown when we are selecting?
One balancing segment value you can assign only one time.
Yes, correct.
It means it won't be available.
Okay, yeah.
Second assignment, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine. So we created location and we created business unit. Any questions here, please? For business unit creation, just those are the 4 fields. Just make a note. And reference data set we will discuss. That is separate topic. Since it is popping up here, we selected data. That's all. And make it, remember, like what value we selected for reference data set, that is common, or common set we selected. Why we don't know, as of now we'll understand that. What is the next task? Assign business unit business functions. For our business unit, we have to enable few business functions. What are the various activities this business unit is performing? The relevant business functions we have to assign to our business unit, as well as assign primary ledger and legal entity to your business unit. Assign primary ledger and legal entity to your business unit. We'll see that. So the task name is assign business unit business function. Hope you are taking the note. Everything you have to capture. If you are planning to practice, you have to capture. So task name is assign business unit business function. Assign business unit business function. Click on this task. Now system is asking you want to set business functions for which business unit. You select your business unit. So you apply and do close your. The name we have as a ADP search. Don't click on the name, it got hyperlink. If you click on the name, it will open the BU definition. So select this record. Don't click on the name. Select record. Scroll little down. Here is the tab called Save and Close. Click on Save and Close tab. For our business unit, we are going to assign business functions. This is all we call as business functions. This is all we call as business function. If you are going to implement payables application for this business unit, you should enable the two business functions. Those are payables invoicing and payables payment. Payables invoicing and payables payment. If you want to implement receivables application for this business unit, we should enable billing and customer payment. If you want to implement PPM applications for this business unit, you should enable the business function called as project accounting. If you are going to implement the procurement or purchase application for this business unit, you should enable procurement. So for every activity, the specific set of activities which you treat as a kind of function, you should enable based on in which activities this business unit is going to involve, which are aligned with this different applications. So you can enable very specific, or else you can enable all the business functions. There is no harm. Enable it. If you enable, user cannot use automatic. You have to implement. Okay, if you enable all, if you don't implement specific, user cannot use those applications. So there is no issue. If you just enable, user cannot use as it is. Even if you enable, you should implement that application, then only user will be in the position to use that application. You may enable whatever you require, or else you may enable all. Generally, you can enable all, or else if you want to go very specific, whatever you are implementing for the client, you enable those. So I'm going to enable all. Okay, there is no issue. Will not have any challenge. So just enable. Enabled. Now, so we discussed the first point is assign business functions to business unit. And the next another point within the task is assign your primary ledger and legal entity to this business unit. So within this business unit, say you want to create invoice. To create invoice, we need primary ledger. So within this business unit, which primary ledger you are going to use? Which primary ledger you are going to use? That primary ledger you have to select here. Select ADP. Say OK. To this primary ledger, we assign one legal entity. How many legal entities you assign? All you can see from here, but we assigned only one. From those legal entities list, you can select legal entity. This business unit is belongs to which legal entity? Okay, here when you select legal entity, you may have 10 legal entities here, but which legal entity you have to select as a default for this BU? This BU should belongs to any one of the legal entity. That legal entity you have to select here. So this is a different story when we create inventory organization. There this BU will be available for kind of profit center business unit, which is aligned with inventory organization functionality. Okay, I'll just show you where if you enable the checkbox, this BU can be selected during the inventory organization creation. Yep. But you don't need to do anything with that here. So leave it. So this is how you have to enable the business unit business functions and assign primary ledger and legal entity to your business unit. Then click on save and close. So this is all about how to assign business unit business functions to BU, how to map specific primary ledger and legal entity to business unit. Any questions here, please?
Can we create our own business unit, business functions,
We cannot.
or we need to use only the
We
predefined
cannot.
list?
Okay.
Mhm.
Because these all are aligned with the application functionality. If you select payables invoices, you will be able to create invoices. If you create your own, what you can do with that? No. This should
Do
be
we
done
know
by
what
a
are
document. You cannot create your own business functions.
do we know what are the different, I would say, is functions that this business function can perform just by naming it? So payables invoice
These
means.
are self-explanatory. See, if you look at anything, they given naming convention accordingly. By seeing, you can understand.
Yeah. Other than that, for example, I have a
You have to
customized
read.
business.
You have to read Oracle documentation if you want to understand more than that. Yeah. So, but here, this is enough for us to understand when you work. See, it's when you are learning, it may not make sense in the first go. Once you learn, start working on the application, you'll be knowing each and everything by the time. So it would be easy for you to understand. If somebody is looking at the screen for first time, if they don't know anything, it may not make sense. Okay. Yeah, let's try to understand what we are discussing. No need to drill down too much. Yeah, you can ask the questions, no issues, but no need to drill down too much. We are not going to get into R&D kind of thing. Yeah. To understand if required, what you can do is, if you want to understand more and more, here is the help icon. Okay, click on help icon. It will take you nice help repository. Too much of information you can find and you can read it. That's how it works. What level you have to understand, definitely I'll cover. I don't miss anything. Yeah, but still you can ask.
Yeah, just asking, that's
Stopping.
fine.
Yeah, just as a
Yeah.
note I'm telling. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Fine. So here, okay, and another point. See, if I disable payables invoicing and payables payments, okay, what will happen? I disable payables invoicing and payables payments. Okay, these two put together will support payables application functionality. If I disable these two, if I go and try to implement payables, I will not find this business unit. This business unit is not designated for payables implementation. Okay, we are not opting this BU for payables implementation. If these two checkboxes are enabled, say you enabled only payables invoices. Now you can implement only invoice process for this business unit. You cannot implement payment process. You cannot implement payment process for this business unit. So that's how it will have an impact. So if you enable, say for example, I want to implement project accounting, nothing but PPM. Within the PPM, project costing and billing, these are the two many applications we have, but costing and billing application, in these two applications only we can create accounting entries. That is the reason those two applications we call as project accounting. Along with the costing billing application, we have many other applications. In those applications, no accounting takes place. If I disable this project accounting for PPM consultant, this BU will not be visible. They cannot see this business unit when they do the project related applications implementation. So that is the reason we should enable. So if you enable, this BU would be eligible to implement the relevant applications. Okay, this is the point we have to understand when we talk about business functions.
Generally,
Yeah,
at client place, do we select all these business functions for one business unit or only specific business functions to specific business units?
the same I explained, right? So you can choose whatever you want. Otherwise, you can choose all. Generally, we choose all. This is what we discussed already.
Then what is the use of business function? Every business function has every function that can perform. Then obviously you do not have any constraint or limitations on the business units, right?
No. See, how many
So the
offerings
same
we can,
business
one second. I'll make you to understand. When you look at offerings, are we able to see all the offerings? Yes, right? In the initial sessions, we enabled offerings and options. Can you answer, please?
we see we can see only the offerings that are enabled.
No. I am asking, if you get access to the instance, can you see all the offerings or not? Yes, we can see. And we enable whatever we require, right?
Yes.
We can enable whatever we require. So even
Yeah.
Oracle is going to display the offerings for which offerings you are not subscribed, you are not going to enable because you are not intended to use those offerings since you didn't take any license or subscription. In the same way, say you don't have any subscription for PPM, no issues, you can enable. If you enable, no wonders are going to happen. So this BU would be available to implement PPM, but anyway, you are not going to implement. You are very clear, you don't have any subscription from Oracle. So that's how there is no harm. If you think through like, no, I should not, yes, don't enable. That's fine. Enable whatever you require. Which applications you are going to implement accordingly enable. Or else enable everything for which applications you have a subscription from Oracle, accordingly do the implementation. Okay. See, not only through manual process, going forward, we are going to create the business unit through automatic process. In the automatic process, Oracle also going to enable all the business functions automatic. So in the automation process, everything will be enabled. If you want to disable few, which you are not desired to use, that's okay. You can do that. Even if you don't do, no issues. The BU will be available for implementation. Anyway, you don't implement since you don't have rights to implement without any subscription. That is a simple point we have to understand. Right. So we assigned business functions to our business unit. And also we assign primary ledger and legal entity to business unit. Done. What is the next task we have to perform? So we have to create employee user. Employee user is nothing but you create employee record, basic employee record, plus for the same user you will create the for the same employee you will create the user. Employee plus user we call as employee user. For any employee, if you are going to create the user, that we call as employee user. so that the employee can have access to our instance to perform their daily task. It may not be daily task. Okay, the employee may need access to the instance to enter their time card. So why we have to create employee user? Already we have implementation user. We created implementation user called ADP. From where we created? We created implementation user from security console. From security console, we created implementation user. Now we are talking about employee user. The employee user we can create from HCM. There is separate task from HCM. By using the task, you can create the employee user. What happens if you don't create employee user? With this ADP, we can perform all the setups, but there are certain exceptions. If you assign application implementation consultant role and IT security manager role to user, that user will be able to perform the setups. But if that user is not an employee user, certain configurations cannot be performed by that user. The best example you can take, supplier creation. Okay, supplier creation. The entire complete supplier definition can be done by employee user. Being a implementation user, you cannot create entire supplier definition. Yes, you can create partial supplier, not complete information. With partial supplier, if you create, you cannot use that supplier to create your purchase orders, to create payables invoices. You cannot use. If you want to create the supplier invoices, you require employee user. And to perform other transactions also, you want to create purchase requisition from procurement side, purchase order you want to create, and few other documents if you want to create. The user should be an employee user. The employee user only can perform those activities. So that is the reason we have to create employee user. When there is a need of creating employee user, why we didn't create employee user till this point of time? The reason is, if you want to create employee user, we need legal entity and business unit. Along with this, the hidden definition is primary ledger also we required. But during the employee user creation, we have to select LE and BU. When LE and BU are in place, you have to understand primary ledger also would be there, but you no need to select. But the primary ledger is always assigned to your BU. When you are selecting business unit, already we assigned our primary ledger to business unit. That means you are selecting your primary ledger indirectly. But selection wise, these two you have to select. Indirectly, you are mapping your primary ledger also to employee user. So in every fresh instance, when you start doing the configuration, you will not find any legal entity and business unit until unless you create. So that is the reason always we create implementation user. With the help of implementation user, we complete the setups like legal entity, business unit, primary ledger, etc., etc. Once the legal entity and business units are ready, then you can create employee user. So the employee user will become more than, in terms of privileges, the employee user will become more powerful compared to implementation user when if you assign same roles to employee user also. For implementation user, you are assigning application implementation consultant, IT security manager roles. If you assign these two roles to implementation user and employee user and implementation user will have a equivalent privileges because of these two roles. Apart from that, since user is employee user, the user will have additional privileges to create supplier, purchase requisition, purchase orders based on the provisioning. If you allow that employee user to create supplier, this employee user will be able to create supplier. If you allow the implementation user to create the supplier, implementation user, even if you allow implementation user cannot create the entire supplier definition. If you allow implementation user to create purchase requisition and PO, if you give access, you may give access, but that user cannot create the purchase requisition, purchase orders. Only employee user can create. You give access to both users, employee user and implementation user. Certain actions implementation user cannot perform since implementation user is not an employee user, not an employee in the organization. So that's how it works. So, and a few other points. Later I'll take your questions. If you want to create employee user, we have two options. We have two options. You can create very brand new employee user. The second option is you can convert implementation user as employee user. So you can create new employee user, or you can convert implementation user as employee user. Ideally, we convert because already we assign the roles to implementation user. If you convert implementation user as employee user, again we don't need to assign the roles. If you create new employee user, again you have to assign the application implementation consultant role, IT security manager role, and maybe other roles if required. So you can convert implementation user as a employee user. When you try to convert, the implementation user as a employee user, you can specify there. Okay, so the employee, that user is belongs to which business unit and which legal entity. And there are certain other details also, but at this stage not required. We'll see whenever those are required. When you work with employee supervisory hierarchy, etc. approvals, there we will come across those relevant information. For now, the scope is limited. How to create employee user. Okay, how to create employee user. And before we create employee user, why to create employee user? Why we have to create employee user? Already we have implementation user. So what is the benefit? Those are the points we are trying to understand. So now we'll go and see in the system how to create employee user. After creating employee user, if you have any questions, we'll discuss. Okay, if you have any questions, my request is just park temporarily. Those may get answers based on the exercise what we are going to do, simulation in the system. Still, if those questions are open after creating employee user, we can discuss. Fine. Now, when you create employee user, we discussed, we have to select legal entity and business unit. Okay. When you select legal entity, what system will do is, system will try to identify this employees belongs to which payrolls. So when you create employee user, system will look for this employees belongs to which payrolls. So every country will have a separate payrolls. From HCM point of view, there will be payroll solution. So for every country will have a separate payrolls. But when you create employee user, system will look for the information the employees belongs to which payrolls. How you can define that payroll element? Okay, payroll related definition. So we discussed as a part of enterprise structure to segregate and to maintain the employees information and to run the payrolls country specific, we have to create something in the system we discussed. What is that? Anyone please? If you are reading, if you are learning actively, you can answer this. Anyone please?
In structure. when we are creating the organization
No,
structure.
no. Simple answer. Just you tell in one word. That's it.
Would you repeat question, Lakshman?
Yeah. So we discussed as a part of enterprise structure. One point we
Okay.
discussed.
As a part of sorry.
One second. Let me repeat for someone who asked. Yeah, I'll take your answer. Okay. When you create enterprise structure, we discussed one point. To maintain the country specific employees information separately and to run the country specific payrolls, we have to
On
define
LDG.
something in the system.
Legislative data
That's
group.
what,
On
yes,
LDG.
correct. You are right. Legislative data group. Now, what system will do is when you create employee user, it will look for legislative data group. This employees belongs to which legislative data group. That's what system will do. So we have to create legislative data group in the system. Okay, we have to create. So we'll create legislative data group. LDZ. Okay, if you're answering, you're on the track. Yeah. You have to create legislative data group. When you create employee user, system will look for legislative data group. Can we assign legislative data group to user, employee user? No. But then how we can connect legislative data group to employee user? At the time of employee user creation, we select legal entity. So we assign legislative data group to legal entity. Then through legal entity, the employee user definition will identify the employees belongs to which legislative data group. So what we have to do is first we have to create legislative data group and assign legislative data group LDZ to your LE. Means what we are trying to do here is we create LDZ. That LDZ we are going to assign to LE. This LE we are going to assign to employee. Employee means employee user. What's the employee? Anything is okay. Now, when you create employee user or say just employee, first employee, later you may have user, may not have user. When you create employee, the employee record need to be identified by relevant payrolls. So whatever the legal entity you are selecting for this employee definition, that legal entity which legislative data group is assigned, that this employee record will connect. So that is a system requirement, system point of view, that connection need to be established. Otherwise, what happens is when you create employee user, when you select legal entity, if legislative data group is not assigned to this legal entity, system won't allow you to create employee user with that LE. It throws error message saying that legislative data group need to be associated with the legal entity. That connection is missing. Please set up and use it. So without assigning legislative data group to legal entity, if you try to create employee user, okay, system won't allow. It will throw the error message. Okay, that's how it works. That's what you have to understand. For that reason, first we'll create the legislative data group. Then we'll assign the legislative data group to legal entity. Already we have our legal entity ready. We'll assign legislative data group to legal entity. By using the legal entity and business unit, we will create employee user. Okay. So these are the points. Any questions here before we proceed with the system to create LDZ and LDZ assignment to legal entity and employee user creation? No questions. My request is always go on mute. Okay. When you ask the question, that's okay. But after that, don't forget to mute yourself. That's a request all the time. Yeah. We'll see how to create. We'll create all this again. We'll discuss if you have any questions. Yeah. So we'll see how to create the legislative data group. Here the question is, whose responsibility this legislative data group is. It is not our responsibility. Being a finance consultant, we no need to create legislative data group. It should be created by HCM consultant. It is completely related to payroll. So HCM consultant should create. When you are working for any project, if HCM implementation is in the scope, that's okay, they'll create. If HCM implementation is not in the scope, it is a simple task. We have to create, there is no other option. Okay, we should create so that the relevant configuration will support. We'll see how to create the legislative data group. Go to instance, and here go to task pan, navigate to global search, click on search. So task name is saved. We discussed about legislative data group. Okay, search for legislative data groups. Here is the task. Manage legislative data groups. Click on this task. Click on plus icon. Provide name. Ideally, we create legislative data group for each country. If you are implementing the Fusion applications for your client for 10 countries, for each country, one legislative data group need to be created as a part of HCM solution to run the payrolls accordingly. Here you can say ADP US legislative data group. So it belongs to which country? Select United States. So the moment you select country, currency will be defaulted. And cost allocation structure. It is related to payroll again, since legislative data group definition is related to payroll. So here what HCM consultant will do is, they'll create all the payroll elements. If you look at your payslip, whatever you see as a basic HRA, convenience, etc., those all they'll create by using the cost allocation structure. Within the cost allocation structure, they'll create all the components which you see in the payslip as elements in the system. So anyway, that is optional. We are not interested in that. Leave it. Our requirement is we need one legislative data group. Otherwise, you cannot complete our employee user creation setup. Click on submit. Say yes and okay. So we are ready with the legislative data group. What is the next task? We need to assign this legislative data group to legal entity. Okay, assign legislative data group to legal entity. So click on done. So you search for the task called as legal entity HCM information. Legal entity HCM, you type, it should pop up. Yeah. Manage legal entity HCM information means we are going to do the mapping with HCM information. Yes, legal entity will be used in HCM also, but here mapping we are going to create between HCM record, that is nothing but LDZ, with legal entity. The task name is manage legal entity HCM information. Hope you are taking all the notes. Now click on the same task. Okay, here find out our legal entity. Already we created legal entity, right? Find our legal entity. ADP, hit search tab, and here we could see our legal entity record. Now click on legal entity name. We have a hyperlink for this legal entity record. Click on legal entity name. Find and click on legal entity. That's it. Now, so within this page, we can assign our legislative data group to legal entity. Okay, within this page, we can assign our legislative data group to this legal entity. From where we can assign within this page. Here is the payroll statutory unit. Payroll statutory unit is nothing but legislative data group. This is a kind of some alternative name. Just click on payroll statutory unit tab. There will be separate field with our desired name. Here is the associated legislative data group is the field. Here we have to select our legislative data group. That means we are assigning our legislative data group to legal entity. Now this record is not editable by default. Now you have to turn this record into editable so that you will be able to do this mapping. Click on edit. The update corrections, it's kind of HCM functionality, date effective tracking functionality, which they have, that we don't need to worry about it. You just, our task is assigning, simply select update. What reason you are updating? I don't want to say any reason. Say okay. Just say okay, this entire record will turn into editable mode so that we can assign our legislative data group to legal entity. So we are under payroll statutory unit tab, and here is the field for legislative data group, and select your legislative data group here. Say okay. So we assigned legislative data group to legal entity, because one legal entity will belongs to one country only. We cannot have one legal entity in multiple countries, right? So ideally, one legislative data group we assign. Then click on submit and say okay. We completed mapping between LE and LDZ, legislative data group. Okay, we completed mapping between LDZ and LE. Now we can go and create employee user. While we create employee user, we will select LE, which is already mapped with LDZ, so that system will accept. If LDZ is not assigned to LE, if you select LE at the time of employee user creation, system won't allow you to create employee user. Right? So we'll go and create employee user. Click on done. So what is the task we have to use to create employee user? We have one HCM related task that we call as manage users. The task name is manage users. With the manage users, you can create employee user, employee basic information along with the user definition. To create employee user, we have to use the task called as manage users. Now click on search, click on manage users, and click on plus icon to create employee user. Click on plus icon. So here we have to provide basic employee information. The reality, employee records need to be maintained by HCM team. But this is a shared page. Okay, here we can create employee with very basic information. The other, all the details for the same employees need to be maintained by HCM team. So first we'll see how to convert our implementation user as employee user. After testing that, we will test how to create new employee user. I'm taking the same name, ADP. Here you can provide employee last name, first name, middle name, title, etc. So I'm just going with only mandatory fields. Last name I given as ADP, and provide email ID. The employee hire rate, it's taking today's date by default. I accept, no issues. So are you going to create new user or you are going to convert? If you are converting, here you have to select existing user. If you want to create the new employee user, directly you provide the name here. With that name, it will create employee user. So we don't want to create new, we'll create later. First, we want to convert. To convert existing user, existing implementation user as employee user, select link user account radio button and click on this link icon. Find our user which we created from security console, ADP. Find out, yes, we have ADP with active status. Select user, say OK. Done. Now, to convert this ADP as an employee user, we have to specify certain data. This employee belongs to which business unit and which legal entity, and we have to provide the relevant information. To do that, scroll little down. When you say person type, you can have a two type of person types as per system when you talk about employment. One is employee, means kind of permanent employee, and another employee type is contract employee, which we can call as contingent worker. In very fresh instance, if you come to this page, in the person type, you can see only two values. One is employee, the other value is contingent worker. Now, if you see in this instance, we have many. This instance is used by the people who are learning HCM also. So for their practice purpose, they created additional person types. By default, Oracle is delivering only these two values, contingent worker and employee. Rest all are created by using the relevant function. Okay. So what we have to select is employee. Select person type as employee and select legal employer. Legal employer is nothing but our legal entity. Okay. Legal employer. If you remember, at the time of legal entity creation, we enabled our legal entity as a legal employer. What legal employer can do? They can employ the people. Means based on that registration, they are hiring the employees. Certain registrations may not be legal employees. You have a 10 registrations, but two registrations only legal employers. Two registrations only may act as a legal employers, nothing but the two organizations only will hire the employees. The remaining, you may not hire, you may not run the payrolls with those entities. Okay, here we have to select our legal entity. Say ADP and select. When you select, system will validate. Is there any LDZ associated to this legal entity or not? If assigned already, it will accept, or else it will throw error message. Accepted. And this employee belongs to which business unit? Every employee should belongs to any one of the business unit in organization. So that you have to select. And other information which is required as a part of employee record is job, grade, department, etc. These all need to be managed by HCM consultant. Okay, we are trying to get basic employee record with user definition. So this is how we have to create the user. Any questions here, please? Click on
Mine
save
is-
and close. It will take some time. Meantime, we'll discuss. Yeah,
So can you select one or more view?
no option.
No option, but we can have one or more view in one legal entity.
The employee will belongs to one BU, but you can give access to multiple BUs to perform the transactions. We are talking about just belonging. That's it.
Okay.
Access point of view will give separately. Say this ADP need access to 4 business units. That is a different story. we can give access to 1 or 4 or 10. Yeah, that's different, but just by default, every employee should belongs to one business unit. That's it.
Okay.
So we'll create user from the without converting implementation user as employee user. So before we proceed, so whatever the points we discussed, whatever we simulated in the instance, any questions, please? Now we'll see how to create a user from the scratch. Same process, instead of selecting existing user, we'll give the username here. No difference, no big difference. We'll create XYZ xyz@gmail.com. Username is XYZ. Hope there is no user with this name. We'll see. Person type is employee. Our legal entity is ADP. Business unit also ADP US business unit. Now save it. If the user is available already with this name, we'll get message. Otherwise, it will be created successfully. Seems to we don't have any user with this name. Yes, now it will create. Done. Now the user, whatever we created from the manage users task, this user will get synchronized with our security console page. Automatically the data will flow to security console. You can access the user from security console. We didn't set any password for this user. The user password you can set from security console, or else when you create a user, we are providing the email ID. If you provide valid email ID, you will get one email notification into your inbox to reset the password. I provided dummy email ID. So when you practice, you may provide your valid email ID. So you'll get a reset password link into your inbox. From there you can set, or else go to security console and set the password for the user which you created from directly manage users task. So now we'll go to security console to set the password for XYZ user. Users, the username is XYZ. So user is available. We created this user from manage users task. Open this user, set password. No roles we assign, just we created a user. Click on reset password, enable manual. Reset. Okay. Now, if you click on this record, here you can see associated worker information. Okay, associated worker information. Okay. So worker name is XYZ, person name is, the person number is this, and who is the manager for this worker, and what is the job, and belongs to which business unit. If you provide department at the time of user, that also you can see here itself. If you look at any implementation user, you don't find this section. Okay, only for employee users you can find like this. By just opening any record here, you can understand the user is just implementation user or employee user. So if you don't have these details, you can understand this user is just implementation user. Now we'll go back to our ADP. Open. Now you can see for this user also we have worker information since we converted. When you create directly from security console, we don't find these details. We have to map by using the manage users, then those will reflect in this user record. Just click on that. So that is the story of employee user. Any questions here, please?
Lakshman, hello,
Please.
am I audible? As you were saying, we are going to create employee and user, but we have created user only.
We give an employee name also, right?
Yeah, employee name, but
That's
so
it.
where do
That's
we
it. See,
create
this is
employee?
shared service. It is not a complete full record of employee. That need to be maintained by HCM team. See, worker name.
So you
Number.
just fetch the username if you.
Yeah. Belongs to which business unit. This is what this information defines this user as an employee user. Yeah. We don't. We are not going to maintain very similar HCM records. Okay, basic with a very basic information, we create employee users. That's it.
No, I thought we are going to create both employee and user, and after that we could
Oh,
merge
no.
them.
So just while we are creating, just we do that.
One more question. As I was creating a primary ledger, and then we need to set the ledger after creating primary ledger, and in which I was getting error on retain account something when when we choose retain account.
Yeah, please go ahead.
You could and after that I was when I was selecting that segment values, and the error was segment was not valid.
No,
And
please don't mind. Don't bring those into mid of some discussions. Yeah, definitely I'll take all the questions, but in the end of the meeting, we can
when we are
allocate.
going to
Please.
when we are going
Do
to
that.
ask, or
See, when we are discussing some topic, let's limit our discussion to that point only. Okay.
that's why I'm asking when we are going to cover that kind of question about error, because we get a lot of error while creating or while
One second.
practicing.
See, we covered how to create primary ledger. When you are practicing, if you are getting error, we will look into that. There won't be any separate session for that, right?
I'm practicing.
Yeah, we will look into that. Just in the end of the session, definitely I'll be open to take any sort of questions. But while we are working
Okay,
on
just
specific topic, let's limit our
let me know.
discussion to that only. Yeah, that's my request.
Okay, just let me know when we are going to end this. Okay,
Sure.
we'll connect. Okay.
Fine. So any questions here, please? Okay, no questions. Now, so far whatever we did, okay, so far whatever we did, these all setups we call as common setups. Common setups. You can say foundation setups. Without completing these setups, you cannot use any application. You cannot use payables, you cannot use receivables, you cannot use GL. So these all setups we call as common setups. Okay, we are good with the common setups. Since we are ready with the common setups, okay, in tomorrow's session, what we are going to do is the setups what we did through manual process, like calendar creation, chart of accounts creation. When I say chart of accounts, everything which is related to chart of accounts, and primary ledger creation, setting ledger options, creating legal entity, and creating the business unit, assigning legal entity to primary ledger, assigning balancing segment values to legal entities, and assigning the business unit business functions. Whatever we did so far is all we are going to load into the system by using rapid implementation approach. Rapid implementation. Okay. RI we call it. Oracle is providing rapid implementation templates, nothing but spreadsheets. By using the rapid implementation templates, what are the setups we did so far, as we discussed just now, all the setups you can load into the system. You don't need to go to system to create calendar. You don't need to go to instance to create your chart of accounts. Put the relevant data in the well formatted spreadsheet. That data we can load into instance. That's how your setups would be ready. Okay, that's how your setups would be ready. Yeah. So that is an agenda for tomorrow. In the tomorrow session, we'll see how to prepare this rapid implementation template. There we are going to understand many points. How to create a relationship between the segment values like parent and child, which will support reporting requirements and other aspects. And there we'll understand like how to do the mapping within the spreadsheet, whatever we did so far, all the points we are going to walk through. So that's all for today. If you have any questions, please.
Is Dev 47 environment connectable?
One second. I think now that is not somewhat down, I guess. Okay, I think from yesterday evening, if I'm not wrong, or today morning, we already updated another instance details along with that instance. You can check once and you can find the updated instance. The same I'm using for class also. The same instance. This instance is available. Okay, whatever I'm using for class, the same is available in the drive.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So if no questions, we can wind up.